unmute. Unmute. Yeah, okay. Okay.
Hi, Dr. Megan. We'll just begin in 2 minutes.
Beautiful. Ready to go.
Wonderful.
Good afternoon, Dr. Mohan. Good afternoon, Nikki.
Hi there.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Lata Srinivasan, and I will be your MC for today. I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we all are joining from today, and I pay my respects to their elders, past and present. I extend this respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. On behalf of the Mental Health Foundation and our chairperson, Vasan Srinivasan, I would like to welcome and thank each and every one of you for attending our parenting and mental health webinar. I myself am a parent of 2 daughters and very much know the challenges raising children can bring. I commend the foundation for organizing this event today. National Mental Health Month is an initiative of the Mental Health Foundation Australia, MHFA, to advocate for and raise awareness of Australian mental health as a community. The MHFA's National Mental Health Month is unlike many other mental health awareness campaigns. It aims to bring all Australians together in a nationwide conversation about mental health, and we aim to maintain this conversation for an entire month and beyond. Through a series of various mental health related events, National Mental Health Month is a program that the MHFA is extremely proud of. And we intend to reach out and educate as many Australians as possible to help reduce stigma and facilitate positive and non-judgmental discussions surrounding the important topic of mental health in Australia. With 1 in 5 Australians experiencing a mental health illness, it is time we give mental health its due attention. And that is exactly what the MHFA is wanting to achieve. Throughout this month, many events have been organized in each state and territory in Australia, aiming to attract and unite Australians of all ages and backgrounds to raise awareness of the need for better mental health for all. This year, the theme of National Mental Health Month is Post-Pandemic Recovery Challenges and Resilience. This year's theme will focus on raising awareness about mental health in various industries and communities. Every individual has faced, and many are still facing, unprecedented challenges due to the COVID-19 pandemic. With this theme in mind, we aim to extend our campaign even wider than previous years, with events planned to embrace many different community groups and people of all ages walking on the road to recovery and fostering resilience. Please join us in celebrating the Mental Health Foundation Australia by viewing a short video.
Hi everyone, I'm Vasan Srinivasan, Chairperson of the Mental Health Foundation Australia. It's a privilege to lead this wonderful community-based mental health organisation in its 91st year of establishment. The MHFA has grown strength to strength over the past few years. With Victorian Mental Health Month in 2018, the National Mental Health Month occurring in 2019, 2020 and this year in 2021. Last year, COVID-19 did not stop us from achieving our National Mental Health Month campaign. I'm proud to say we successfully shifted many events to a virtual platform, very much being able to pursue our objectives of raising awareness and advocating for better Australian mental health. Our primary aim is to reach out to and educate as many Australians as possible, to help reduce stigma and to encourage constructive and non-judgmental dialogue on Australia's critical mental health issue. A highlight of last year's campaign was reaching out to 100,000 Australians all across the country for our National Walks for Mental Health, both virtually through our MHFA app and physically in some states. What a grand success that was. In 2021, with pandemic still affecting many of us, we decided not to give up once again, curating a carefully chosen blend of virtual and physical events for Australians to participate in. This year, we have a new and improved MHFA app, giving people the opportunity to participate in National Mental Health Month from the palms of their hands. This year, theme is mental health and post-pandemic recovery challenges and resilience. Mental Health Foundation Australia is proud to partner with Australian technology business DB Results and take up the well-being app Am I OK? to support our members, enabling individuals to regularly check in on a private and secure platform and ask the question, Am I OK? Am I OK also alerts the user when it's time to seek outside help. We thank DB Results for this opportunity to promote well-being and early intervention. This year, we have launched a special initiative, the Mental Health Appeal on the 10th of October, our World Mental Health Day. Through this, we aim to raise funds for the development of a course promoting life and safety in young people. At the MHFA, we pride ourselves in making sure all our programs are for the community and powered by the community. We have a vast growing network of multicultural ambassadors, youth ambassadors, and future leaders who further the community voice in promoting mental health and well-being. Our multicultural network has inspired our educational and multicultural webinars as an initiative to assist individuals cope with success during the pandemic. I would like to take this moment to thank our board directors and patrons, scientific advisory committee members, our wonderful staff, multicultural and youth ambassadors, future leaders, MHFA members and major sponsors for their continuous support to our organization as we continue to work to deepen understanding of the importance of mental well-being and educating the community. Let's work in solidarity for the benefit of our mental health. Thank you, Australia.
I would now like to introduce our two keynote speakers for today. Emeritus Professor Bruce Tong, patron of the MHFA, and Associate Professor Awil Brereton. Emeritus Professor Bruce Tong is an academic child and adolescent psychiatrist who recently retired after 20 years as head of the Center for Development Psychology and Psychiatry at Monash Medical Center in Melbourne. He continues research and clinical work. His key research interest is developmental psychiatry with an emphasis on autism and childhood anxiety and depression. Associate Professor Awil Brereton is an early childhood special educator and adjunct senior research fellow in the Monash University Center for Development Psychiatry and Psychology. She has worked in the field of autism for over 30 years in a variety of settings. She's research and teaching interests in the area of development psychiatry with a particular focus on autism spectrum, disorders and behavioral and emotional disturbance in children and adolescents with intellectual disability. It is an honor to have you both with us today. Please join me in welcoming Professor Bruce Tong and Associate Professor Awil Brereton.
Greetings to you all. It's great to be here with the Foundation on this important day. I'm speaking to you, and Dr. Brereton speaking to you from North Queensland, Jury country, and we acknowledge the Indigenous owners of this land, their elders, past, present and emerging. And welcome today any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders who may be joining this seminar. Well, today we're going to be talking about families and parents, and in particular about their children. It's very important that we think of children because they're central to our lives.
How are you stopping the kids doing things?
When we think about children and their mental health, we have to put them in a world which is complex and a developmental stage, which is also complicated. This slide here shows all the things we need to think about when we're considering the mental health of a child and also their families. Firstly, children are born with a body that functions biologically, and that's influenced by its inheritance, its genes, and the status of the child's health. And that influences their mental health. We need to also think about the child's intellectual abilities. Some children are incredibly intellectually gifted. Most of us are in the average range, but there are some children who, for all sorts of reasons, are slower to learn, but are still wonderful members of the human race. We also need to think about the educational opportunities that a child has. And at this time of pandemic restrictions, this has been an incredibly important factor in the child's mental health and adjustment, because they've been learning at home rather than at school, or their families have been under enormous pressure from the COVID. Parents working from home, domestic violence happening at home, all sorts of difficulties the child might have to cope with. On the other hand, children have flourished at this time because they've had their parents' attention 24/7. And so therefore, the social and family experience that a child experiences is very important to their mental health. The environment of their family, how close their parents are, how loving, different family constellations, families with extended families living under the one roof, some families just comprising one parent. The other thing that contributes to a child's mental health is their temperament, their personality. We're all born with a particular sort of temperament. Some of us are easy, some of us are difficult. That contributes to our mental health. And children also have a degree of resilience, some more, some less, and that's a factor we have to consider. Finally, children do suffer from mental health problems. We know that at any one time, up to 20% of children might be suffering from a mental health problem like anxiety or depression. And certainly during the time of COVID, that prevalence has increased significantly. So while we're talking, I want you to keep that complex range of interactions that acts around a child and their mental health and adjustment in mind. Now, how can parents get help for managing their children through this difficult time? Well, in fact, because many of us are now living online rather than face-to-face, we go online, don't we? And we look for help. And if you do that, you'll find that there's a number of different parent programs available. There are all sorts of programs offering advice and health to parents. It's almost a minefield to work out which is best for me. But we say that the best thing to do when you're looking at a parenting program is to try and determine which one has evidence behind it. In other words, is this a program for me about how to raise my children that I know has been tested and shown to work? Now, some of those, which I'll refer to, for example, are those conducted by the Parenting Resource Centre. And in fact, they've got a good guidance on there as to what programs have evidence. There's a wonderful program coming from Victoria called Tuning Into Kids. And that's excellent in terms of helping parents and children. There's another excellent program, and in fact, this program was a winner in our community service award during this mental health month. That's School TV. Have a look at their website. This program runs throughout schools. Teachers have taken it on board, and it's helping children and families with their mental health. There's also another program called Triple P, and that's one that I know quite a lot about and have been trained in its use. And I'd like to talk a little about that because I know it well. Now, the person that designed this program and his team was Matthew Sanders from University of Queensland, and his program has a number of complex but valuable supports. Firstly, in order to understand what children are going through at this stage, we have to imagine what it's been like for them over the past 2 years, just like it's been for us. There's been a disruption to every aspect of everyday life. Life will never be the same again, actually. There's been physical separation from usual support networks, particularly school, but quite often other support networks like grandparents or uncles or aunties or childcare centres. There's been huge challenges with new technology. Now, mind you, children seem to be born and bred to know how to use new technology these days, but a lot of parents don't. And that's been a big challenge. And children have had to get used to learning online. Ultimately, even for children, there's been a loss of personal control. So what are the concerns from children? Now, all of these points have been distilled from interviews of many, many children around Australia. These are the words of children. Children are concerned about their health and safety, but also of their family and friends. And interestingly, many of them are very, very concerned about their pets. Will their dog be safe? Will my budgie be okay? What's going to happen to my goldfish? So take it seriously when children raise these fears, even if they seem a bit cute. They are concerned about missing out on being with friends. And it does frustrate them, even though they do have social media to help them stay in touch. But of course, that's complex because it's not always safe, is it, social media? And some children get bullied on social media. They're very disappointed that plans have not worked out. Now, children have plans just as we do. Birthday parties, a gap year, part-time jobs, meeting up with friends down at the beach during school holidays and so forth, even going for a ride with friends on Saturday morning or playing sport. They worry about their schoolwork and grades. They're aware that they're slipping behind. There's also a boredom factor. Children get bored just like adults do, and it's very difficult to keep children occupied 24/7 at home simply because they're so active. And at school, there's such a big range of programs. And kids do worry about the future. Even very young children, for example, are very worried about climate change. They wish we adults would get on and fix it up. And that's got all caught up in the issue of the pandemic. Now, the Triple P program is a multi-layer program. By that, I mean it's got things which are light touch, easy to take in, only take a few minutes sometimes to learn about, right through to very complex programs being offered, say, over 10 or 15 sessions to families with great difficulties. Low intensity programs are things like parent guidance tip sheets, media coverage like we're doing today. That's a low touch program help for parents. There are seminars that Triple P run which last an hour. You can tune into them and in an hour get some good help. There are also a range of TV series in 20 episodes, and you can get those online and work through a whole range of different issues. Okay. Then there are the more complex Triple P programs where you can go online now for 8 sessions and meet either with another group of families or just with your therapist to solve some difficulties. We'll give a few examples of some of these now.
It's COVID specific.
Here are some COVID specific tip sheets. Very helpful for parents. We won't look at all of these, but for instance, there's tip sheets on being truthful and answering children's questions. Tip sheets on reassuring your child about your family, about organising everyday family routines, about helping children to learn and tolerate more uncertainty. So there's lots of advice on those tip sheets, and they're freely available on the Triple P website. Now, here's an example of the more complex program where you'd go online and meet a therapist and do some work on helping your families. For example, in the first episode of this program, it's creating routine and predictability. The next is avoiding family feuds. The next one is how do parents juggle responsibilities. Another on taking care of yourself. We recognise that if parents are taking care of themselves and are managing their own mental health, then their children will be much better. Staying socially connected. Sharing parenting. In other words, should it just all fall on the shoulder of the mother or the father? How can we share precious time? Getting a good night's sleep. That sounds simple, doesn't it? But what is happening during the COVID is that some children are having a reversal of their sleep cycle. They're staying awake all night and being asleep at day. Building positive homeschool relationships, protecting children from harm, and having healthy habits. A great program which is available online. So this is where you can go if you wish to look at that. Easy, triple net. There's training, materials, implementation and support. Now, there have been a special number of programs prepared for the pandemic. Top 10 tips for parenting during COVID. Top 10 tips for schooling and homeschooling. Triple P Parenting Guide on supporting healthy relationships and managing disagreement. Balancing work and family life, and parenting. Very helpful. So that's an example of a parenting program. But as I mentioned, there are others. Now, Dr. Brereton's going to move on to a more specific issue that a number of children are facing during COVID.
Thank you, Professor Tong. This is a really important question, I think, and that is, how can we help when children have extra needs? Because Professor Tong has been talking about a wonderful program, Triple P, which is available for parents whose children are developing pretty much as we would expect. But we all know that there are families where this isn't the case, where children do have some special needs. We know that parents need to make important decisions about their children's education and how they're managed and any treatment that's available. And if a child has a disability or difficulties with their learning, families have a lot of questions about what to do next. We know that any treatment for them needs to be really carefully tailored to meet each child's needs, their symptoms, their strengths, and other special needs that they have. And there are a number of evidence-based interventions that are around, and they're more likely to promote development, to improve behaviour and reduce stress experienced by the child and family. So how do we help? Well, we know that support for the child is really important. Early intervention has been talked about for many years. Highly structured programs that are involving parents and professionals working together are really very important. So a range of supports for the child are, of course, important. They might be centre-based or home-based. Behaviour-based interventions, ones which are really focusing on positive behaviour support, teaching new skills, and so on, are important, as are the therapy-based programs from occupational therapists, speech pathologists, and so on. But we also feel what is really vital is parent support, family-based interventions, and there's no doubt that for most families who have children with developmental challenges, they are needing help and support, and in fact, they're asking for it. So it's important that we have programs available for them to be part of. Now, there are a number of evidence-based programs. So these are programs where there's been research to actually demonstrate that they work and are helpful. And some examples are stepping stones, Triple P. So Bruce was talking about Triple P before, Positive Parenting Program. That does have an arm which is particularly focusing on children with developmental difficulties. there's also a program which is drilling down a little further, and that's a Preschoolers with Autism program, which I was part of developing. So that's going beyond thinking about children more generally and thinking about autism in particular. So in terms of the Stepping Stones Triple P project, it's a wonderful program which involved about 3,000 children and families in its development. And it wanted to demonstrate that it could decrease difficulties with behaviour and emotional problems, reduce family risk factors, promote and support family environments, and also improving family well-being. And they were able to demonstrate that all of these things occurred when parents became involved in this program, that children's behaviour and emotional problems certainly decreased significantly. Parents were doing better, they weren't as depressed or anxious and stressed, and their parenting skills really improved. They learned how to be using positive behaviour support, being consistent, a lot of positive encouragement of their children. And any improvements were shown to still be occurring 12 months later. The other important thing about Triple P was that they found that there was a real cost benefit to families because parents were back at work. They were able to be more fully occupied. This is just a graph which is showing you that there's a statistically significant change in children's behaviour problems, and also for parents, statistically significant improvement in depression and anxiety. So the Triple P Stepping Stones program has certainly been shown to have an evidence base, and it's a very worthwhile one. So just briefly to talk to you about the Preschoolers with Autism program, which we developed at Monash University. It goes across 20 weeks, this program, but we also modified this during the year so that we were able to present it via Zoom in response to the COVID pandemic. Now, why would you do a course like this? Well, this one in particular is about autism, and parents do enjoy meeting other parents who've got children with a similar disorder, in this case, autism or a difference. They wanted to learn more about it. They wanted to learn how it affected their child's daily life and so on.
How are you stopping the kids?
Now, most of these parent programs will have a similar sort of format to this. And this is what we did over our program. Some basic information about autism, opportunities for parents to talk about what their issues were. And then we started to put in information about positively supporting children's behaviour, how to encourage new behaviour, teach new skills, to techniques for improving communication, building social skills and working and play together, because they're key areas where children who've got autism are having, do show differences and have some difficulties. Now, when we did this, we worked with probably about 200 families, and we followed them for 2 years after the program in terms of parental mental health. And the blue line is the one that's I want to talk about, because this was a part of the program which had the behavioural support component in it. Even 2 years later, the parents were continuing to improve overall with their general mental health. So this is a program that not only had quick gains, but they lasted over time. Parents were less stressed and becoming even less stressed over 2 years. And when we looked at the children's autism symptoms, these were also decreasing over that time. The green line in each of these cases is what we call a control group, children who didn't get the program. And in all of these areas, things didn't get better over time. In fact, they got worse. Some key take-home messages from Bruce and me before we go. There's absolutely no doubt that programs that are supporting parents can be successfully implemented in the community with community-based practitioners from a broad range of disciplines. And we now know that online works as well. We will see an improvement in children's behaviour and their emotional difficulties, but there is also this wonderful effect too on parental mental health, particularly depression, anxiety and their stress. And we know that with this sort of coaching, parents are feeling more confident and more skilled about their parenting skills.
And we found, of course, too, that there was an economic benefit. In fact, it allowed parents to return back to work and to not be worried at work about how their family was getting on. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Professor Bruce Tong and Professor Avril Brereton, for sharing your valuable insights with us today. We appreciate your time and support, and we look forward to further discussions during our panel later on today. It is my pleasure now to introduce Nikki Tepper, MindStep Coaching Service Manager, Independent and Assisted Living at Australian Unity. Nikki manages the MindStep and Healing Mind services at Remedy Healthcare, working with a team of mental health coaches who provide telephone-based low-intensity cognitive behavioral therapy to people with anxiety and depression symptoms. Previously, as an accredited practicing dietitian, Nikki worked with people with chronic physical health conditions, coaching them towards sustainable lifestyle modifications. Nikki is passionate about empowering people to improve their physical and mental health, both in the present and into the future. Please join me in welcoming Nikki.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here in what's already been a very interesting afternoon. I'm joining you all from Melbourne, so I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of which I live and work on. That's the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to take a moment to recognise the great work of the Mental Health Foundation of Australia and all of the important work they're doing in the mental health space. Mental Health Month, held in October each year, gives us a real opportunity to raise awareness about mental health and wellbeing. And today I've asked to speak with you a bit about the impact of parenthood on mental health. I'm representing Remedy Healthcare today, a subsidiary of Australian Unity. We provide healthcare services Australia-wide and aim to improve the health, wellbeing and quality of life for every person that we care for. I'm fortunate enough in my role to manage our two mental health programs. They're called MindStep and Healing Minds. Also, why I was asked to come along to this particular forum is that I myself am a relatively new parent. My daughter has certainly brought a lot of joy along with quite a bit of stress since she arrived 2 years ago. So I'm just so interested to hear from all of the panellists today about that. In 2016, Remedy Healthcare launched our MindStep program to deliver telephone-based cognitive behavioural therapy. It was the result of a global search to find the best practice interventions for people with mild to moderate anxiety and depression. We've been delivering the program for the past 6 years and have helped thousands of people to improve their mental health. The goals of the program are really to help people articulate their concerns and then learn practical strategies to help work through them. The tools and tips that they learn along the way can help with low mood and stress in future situations as well. I've had a number of academically published articles showing the pleasing results from the program and looking forward to continuing to build over the future. In 2020, our Healing Minds program began. Originally based off MindStep, it is a telephone-based social and emotional wellbeing coaching program specifically for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Still early days, but results to date are looking promising. This year, Remedy was able to announce 2 new mental health partnerships, one with the Tasmanian and one with the North Coast of New South Wales primary health networks, to deliver our MindStep and Healing Minds programs for people with anxiety and depression. This means that our programs are now being provided at no cost with no medical referral required to people living in these areas to help with prevention of more serious mental ill health on a self-referral basis. Any parent will tell you that there's nothing more challenging or rewarding than parenthood. Personally, I went into it with that expectation and it still blew me away. It's just so entirely encompassing. Prior to being a parent, I had worked in my job with many mothers and fathers managing mental health concerns, including a lot of women with postnatal depression. During this time of coaching others, I learned lots of skills and techniques that were incredibly helpful throughout my own first few months of parenthood. It makes me feel incredibly passionate about the importance of mental health education throughout pregnancy for everybody, not just for those who might be considered at risk. Practical coping skills are things that everyone can benefit from having in their toolkit. And then when it comes to parenting children experiencing their own mental health concerns, that's something that I can only imagine, and I truly take my hat off to anyone in that position. I'm very interested to hear from all of our experts today about how to best look after yourself as well as your children when faced with such a hard situation. In closing, Mental Health Month is such an important opportunity to raise awareness about mental health and the range of supports available. Australian Unity recognises and commends the work that the Mental Health Foundation has achieved in this regard, and we are so proud to be associated with the foundation. We're a company founded on social values and community contribution, and we're committed to building and promoting positive mental health strategies. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki, and Australian Unity for your ongoing support to the foundation. I would now like to introduce our third keynote speaker, Dr. Christopher Morgan. Dr. Morgan is a clinical psychologist with over 30 years of experience in the provision of psychological services across a range of people from community health centers, private psychiatric hospitals, work cover, TAC, victims of crime, and in private practice. Dr. Morgan has a special interest in anxiety and phobias, depression, PTSD, OCD, shyness and social skill deficits, smoking cessations, and internet counseling. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Chris Morgan.
Thank you, Latha, and thank you for the previous speakers. I wish I had access to the materials they were speaking of over my growing career. What I'd like to talk about is what happens to me in the clinical setting. So over the last 20 months, we've come across a experience that is very, it's unique in the sense of our worlds have been tipped upside down, and many people have been affected in so many different ways. Some people, their work has gone ahead just as it might have without the pandemic, but other people have lost their livelihood. Other people have been forced, many people have been forced into very cramped conditions, which creates enormous stress. Now, today we're looking at emerging over the next few months from this process, and the way we've handled it across Australia has been very mature, really. The majority of people are close to vaccination, but it's been a fear. And so when you have fear, you have threat. When you have threat, you have a challenge to your resources. And what we want to try to do is to recognize that these experiences have made an indelible mark on us, but it's not something new to mankind. Mankind has fought off microbial type wars throughout its existence. Now, what we want to try to encourage people to do is to keep tough about it and model the kind of way we want our children to cope with it. So whatever we do as adults is a model for the children we're raising. So first of all, I want to just point out that as a model for others, a person's aware of planning, steps to take, not to rush into huge connections with people. Instead, I'd like to encourage people to get the family together and just plan some experiences. A parent has got to enrich their children's life with experiences that create memories, and those memories the children will recreate when they are adults. Second thing, we want to be, and I think the Mental Health Foundation is really dedicated to this idea not to be threatened by differences. We're all one people, and we want to come out of this pandemic with messages that we've taken. And those are where people have come to help, where there's been tremendous courage shown by people who are on the forefront of addressing the pandemic. We also want to think about what's the best thing, what brings out the best part of ourselves. And that is to do what we say we'll do. So if we promise our children an outing, it doesn't have to be a huge thing. It could be have tea in the park. It could be to ask them what friends they'd first like to visit. But I want to encourage a slow, gradual sort of roadmap approach to opening up our lives. Because if we go to rush into it, we're going to increase the number of infections. The second thing I just want to say in this brief note is the idea of resilience is a fantastic thing. It's resilience and persistence are two of the greatest personal qualities we can develop. So the capacity to learn from the experience in the present and to set realistic short-term goals that will increase the confidence of the family. The confidence of the families have been shattered by tension, shattered by arguments, shattered by, just people being under too much stress. And so there's a lot of, we've got to navigate some stormy situations with our in-laws or grandparents or neighbours and so on. So we want that kind of calmness that is perhaps presented by this idea that if we want to be a good parent, we've got to be kind and caring towards our children, got to love them. We also got to set limits for them. But in setting those limits, we want a democratic family where we listen to them and talk to them and get their ideas about what needs to be done. We also want to, in that setting limits, still be fun to be with, to be able to create memorable experience for the kids, and but not very expensive things. It's not buying them toys, it's spending time with them. That was brought out to me when I spent a long time, 10 years or so, in a community health centre in Eltham. And I think I've got time to tell two short stories. One is that the Mattel toy company, which I presume they're still a big wheel, they conducted a research program among 9, 12 and 6-year-olds about a favourite toy, that back in the old days, a favourite toy perhaps became a craze at Christmas, and everybody had a yo-yo or they had a jumping stick. It's not like today, but the surprise to the Mattel people was that the most important thing for these children was they wanted to have family picnics. They wanted to go on surprise drives. They wanted to spend time with their family rather than invent a new craze. The second thing I want to say from way back then, this was before mindfulness became a popular thing, the importance of calming the mind and slowing down the body. When I was in this community health centre, one of the mothers said we want to do a calming and relaxing afternoon. And there are 10 of us, we've all got babies. And we've got a couple of minders to look after the babies. So, but can we just bring a mat and a pillow and have a quiet session, which are very popular these days. But this remarkable experience to me was sort of halfway through the session in a beautiful mud brick open plan house in Eltham. The 9 children were in a distant room. I could see them through the doorways. And the 9 mothers were the children were all of them, 9 of them asleep, and the 9 mothers in a deep reflection. Now, I wish I could have recorded it because I doubt that would happen very often, to get 9 children asleep at the one time. Anyway, so I would like to conclude by just saying that we've got to be aware of the needs of the kids, say going back to school tomorrow, that the mum or the dad might say, perhaps I can drop you there, but that make it easier, because a lot of the struggling kids will find it very challenging. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Morgan, for your insightful address. As always, it's a pleasure to have you on board. I would now like to introduce Mr. Bruce Wong. Bruce is the Managing Director of Food Solutions. Bruce is a strong financial and moral supporter of the Mental Health Foundation of Australia. Please join me in viewing Bruce's address.
Mental Health Foundation Australia is an organisation committed to improving the mental well-being of all Australians. Food Solutions' vision and value are very aligned with Mental Health Foundation Australia, and we have been supporting this charitable organisation for over 2 years now through various programs. We have been very involved in the meal delivery initiative organised by the foundation, which was a huge success last year and has continued this year with over 85,000 meals delivered so far. Food Solutions is honoured to be involved in the National Mental Health Month Awareness campaign run by the foundation, which brings the Australian community together to raise awareness, stem the stigma, and initiate conversation about better mental health and importance of mental well-being, which is required now more than ever. And one thing we can thank the pandemic for is bringing mental health to the forefront, creating the opportunity for more open discussion to be had, furthering the breaking down of stigma and the opportunity to really look at what is required in the mental health space. Another thing we can thank the pandemic for is platforms like Zoom, which help bring us all together in such a wonderful way. This year, the foundation is launching for the first time the Mental Health Appeal on the 10th of October to raise funds to develop a program to educate the community in a hope to prevent youth suicide. I commend the important work Mental Health Foundation Australia is doing in the Australian community, especially within the multicultural cohort. My best wishes and appreciation to Hassan and Jim for providing excellent leadership and direction to this organization. Food Solution will continue to be involved with the Mental Health Foundation Australia and its initiative in improving the mental health of all Australians. I encourage you all to interact with more events during National Mental Health Month, which you can find out more about their website. www.nhfa.org.au. And thank you and enjoy the rest of the event.
Sorry, can you please unmute?
Thank you, Bruce, for your continued support to the foundation. I would now like to invite and welcome our keynote speakers for a panel discussion on this important topic. Today's panel will be open, so please feel free to jump in with any comments you may have. We have had a few questions sent in before today's webinar, which I'd like to start with first. How can parents prioritize themselves when they tend to young kids? When they have to tend to young kids?
Do you want to say anything? Well, maybe I'll start, although I think Chris had some good suggestions in his talk too about this, I must say. It's got to do with thinking about the issue and planning and trying to work together as a team. Now, mind you, that's more difficult when it's a single parent, but try and make life as predictable as possible. And you do that by having a plan. So you look ahead into the week, you think about what's coming up, you work out how you might cope with that, who'll take responsibility, for example, on Friday morning to engage with the teacher who's linking in with the children online, who might cook the dinner on Wednesday evening, who might exercise on Friday morning. Will it be you or will it be me? In other words, because it's complex, it's better to try and plan and have a way forward. The other thing too is don't be hard on yourself. Just realise that you can't be perfect. What you've got to try and be is good enough. And children are forgiving. And in your planning, you actually have plans for times when they're by themselves and have got to try and do things and give them responsibilities. For example, a 5 or a 6-year-old child actually can do some jobs. And I know lots of families, even very complex and problematic families, where for the first time, what's happened with COVID is children are actually sharing some of the domestic responsibilities. Some of the older children are looking after the younger ones. Now, we've got to be careful there. It doesn't have to be 24/7, but children can grow and develop resilience by taking on some of the tasks.
I wonder if one of the other things that might get left behind sometimes, and that is where parents think about what other supports are available to them. Who else can they call on? Because let's face it, you can't just prioritise yourself and the time that you want when you're a parent, particularly of little children. That's not really possible. But if you can reach out to others who might be around to help you with some childminding or some babysitting, if one of your priorities for your time is to be child-free. But I guess another way of thinking about this, and I think it resonates with what Chris was saying, is about planning, but plan family events which everybody enjoys. And when I was listening to Chris, I was thinking about those three pillars of good mental health: someone to love, something to do, and something to look forward to. But maybe when we're thinking about how parents prioritise things, one of those priorities is something to look forward to that involves the whole family or the wider family. So you're sharing responsibility as well and enjoying that time. I feel very sad when I hear parents who feel overwhelmed by the fact that they're parents, that their children sometimes sort of get in the way because it's such a big responsibility and it takes so much time and effort, and parents get tired. But, you know, to not lose sight of the fact that we can enjoy whole family occasions, I think is a really important one.
Thank you. Dr. Mohan, do you have any comments on this? You have to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can hear
So
you
look,
now.
those very sound ideas from both Bruce and Avril. Look, I think we should also give a shout out to the teachers. They've had to work very hard to try and provide learning packages for their children. And some schools had more resources than other schools. But with talking about the parents now, again, they can talk. The parents are stressed. So in other words, sometimes you get arguments into the fact of my work's more important than your work. And that's not very helpful. But what I would like people to plan is say, is there in your workplace a Zoom time when the people meet at a certain time? And we can make sure that is sacrosanct. But take advantage of giving the kids plenty of breaks, like, you know, it's an excuse to go out with your child down to the park. And then when the kids, so they make them nice and active, so they go to bed early. So one of the parents could have after dinner an hour or two where they could both concentrate on planning their next day. So it's a new world. I don't think this is going to change. I think many people will go to the office only 2 or 3 days a week. And again, that's another space where there can be flexibility.
Thank you.
And sometimes children have solutions themselves. This is a personal one on our part, but in fact, a couple of our grandchildren designed a quiz for the whole family, and on Zoom, grandparents, uncles and aunties and everybody came together. And because there's apparently, well, I didn't know this, but there was a website you could go to organise these quizzes. And so we had a terrific time all together.
And the fantastic thing about that was we won.
Oh, wonderful.
Okay. You the answer to some seriously abstract questions.
So that, in other words, picking up what you say, Chris, that Zoom can be used positively, can't it? And it can bring these together at this time. And now that, of course, restrictions are coming off again, and I couldn't agree with Chris more, we've got to move into it slowly, not rush out and use the next 3 days to make ourselves drunk 24/7.
Or spend up.
Or spend up and break the family bank account. There will be a temptation to do that, but go slowly, plan it, and do simple things, actually, if you can.
I think perhaps in the notion of selling the idea of a freedom day, we're all free, isn't always helpful, because we're not actually. We still are struggling with and have to learn how to live with a virus which will become endemic. It will be part of our lives that we'll never really be free of. And I worry if there's this rush out to be free, that people might actually endanger themselves because of some of the behaviour that they're engaging in. So freedom, but, you know, with the brakes on.
Correct. A very interesting question has just popped up. There's a question raised on conflict management. Are there any thoughts on this?
Well, I'll just say this, that you know, when you have an emotional crisis, it's going to bring a reaction, because so we've got to be aware of it, but it's only part of your reaction, and it's like can be like a flash in a way. So we can help people to just sit with that, and it's always been said to parents, don't disagree in front of your children, rather go into another room and then let's get a united position and set the limits. But when conflict does arise, you sometimes have to stop the clock, as in basketball, they have a minute and they kind of just go to a different room and people give it a bit of thought. And so in that way, we've got a chance to open up other options. But because sure as an emotion comes quickly, it passes quickly. But what the problem is with today is that our stress is largely because there's so much around that we can't control. So what we've got to try to do is set little goals and just say, how could we resolve this sort of upset with grandma or whatever it might be? Well, I'll take the kids down to the park or take them down to the beach, and you go for a walk with grandma and work it out. But not sitting opposite each other at the table, but rather walking side by side, which tends to take a little bit of the non-verbal signals out of focus. So that's just a couple of thoughts.
In some of these parent guidance sessions, quite a lot of time spent on conflict and how to manage it. And I think you were suggesting this too, Chris. It's better when you're not in conflict to have a family meeting or a meeting between the parents to decide what you're going to do if you lose it. How are you going to manage exploding? How are you going to manage getting to the end of your tether?
Yeah.
How are you going to manage feeling angry? Because we all can from time to time, and under stress, it's even easier. And quite often, what families can do, and this is done at schools too, is to have a pre-arranged sign or signal that either you yourself can use or another member of your family to say, time out, take a breather, and to have a pre-arranged agreement on where you can go to simmer down. Now, for example, it might be that every member of the family agrees on a hand signal, that if mother goes, it means I'm not managing. And I therefore have permission to go to the bedroom and lie on the bed and you're not to interrupt. Or if mother goes to the child, that's a sign, and the child's already agreed that I'm not managing, it's time to calm down. And I'll take as long as I need until I calm down. And so they go off, for example, to a chair in the lounge room or onto the back porch. Now, of course, this becomes very difficult in cramped apartments where it is more difficult to hide away. But in those circumstances, we even suggest things like using a child's play tent. So whoever's cross goes into the tent, and that can include one of the parents. It's all got to do with the fact that we need to have a pre-arranged breathing space. If we've all agreed on it, it's more likely to happen. Doesn't always work, but it might.
That makes me remember a mum telling me she had little children, and it was in the days when she used a playpen. And she said, one day it was just so horrible that I put myself in the playpen. And that was something that my little children understood. That Mum had to contain herself just for a while because she'd lost it. Yes, that worked.
That worked, yes. There's one more interesting questions over here which says, how might parents respectfully approach grandparents when they may be overstepping? It's a very touchy question.
That's a great question. And in fact, over the past couple of years, I've been working with grandparents, groups of grandparents, because it's a really interesting group to work with. And I'm talking about working with grandparents of grandchildren who've got autism spectrum disorder, because the grandparents are worried about their children who are the parents of the child with autism. So it's like another layer of complexity added on. In fact, in our parenting program too, one of the things that we always talk about is the wider family, what's happening. And you need to have some rules and good conversation about how those two generations are working together, and in-laws as well, so that everybody is cooperating. And I think the only solution to this is actually by talking to each other. And we know that more and more grandparents are taking responsibility for childcare. But if that grandparent is not managing the child the way you want to as mum or dad, it creates conflict. But if you start setting some ground rules at the beginning, but not in a bossy way or a demanding way, but actually have a conversation. How are you doing this? What works best for you? Mum, have you got any tips on what worked with me when I was little? I wonder if that would work. So it's actually about having a conversation, because everybody needs to cooperate, and cooperation isn't going to happen without a conversation, I don't think. You need to get people's opinions. And then it sort of comes together.
Chris, you're
Dr. Mohan, you just have to unmute.
Okay. Just want to say about communication there that mostly these days people send messages. You know, they don't unfortunately don't pick the phone up all that much, but what I just would recommend to people, not to send a very long message when you're upset, or if you do pen out your long message, put it in draft and at least discuss it with your partner, because it's going to, well, I think there are many bonfires blazing at the moment, I would suggest, about this particular point.
No, that's interesting that you say that, Chris, because when I'm talking about conversations, I immediately think face-to-face about having a face-to-face discussion. And then it immediately sort of jolts me back into the reality of the world about, yes, it is, it's by text. A number of our kids, in talking to us about their children, so our grandchildren, they're sending us text messages. And look, that's fine when things are going well, but yeah, as you say, if there's conflict or difficulty.
Yeah, I just think my thought about it is that when you get on that machine, you can say a lot of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
It's out in the permanently out in the universe then. Whereas my encouragement is to, as you're saying, drop in or go for coffee and just kind of, got to face it, got to accept it, that people are overstretched and therefore they're going to be prone to anger, prone to impulse, get in touch with all that sort of helplessness they've felt over the last 20 months. And their fears for the future are just going to be like a torrent. So the quiet voice is like the compassionate voice for each other, and yeah, for each other. That's what we want.
And I think that the other side of the voice is the ear. It's about listening. It's about listening to the other person's concerns and listening carefully and quietly. One of the things that I will say to parents and to other family members is if you wouldn't say that to them face to face, then don't type it as a message to them or send it in an email.
Yeah.
There's a flip side to this too, because I've certainly seen where some families or the parents have become really worried about their own parents taking control or telling their children things which aren't true. And so they get very angry about that. But what happens sometimes with parents and grandparents is when they're worried themselves about something, they may put that onto a displaced concern for the child. So sometimes the circuit breaker can be the parent who's angry with their parent because they're over intruding to say, well, by the way, Mum, how are you feeling at the moment? Is there anything on your mind?
Yes.
Now, that's a really hard thing to do because you're cross with them for interfering. But really, it just might be a signal that they've got a problem too.
Yeah.
So it's about listening, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on, we have this person has asked, is there a link between insecure attachments as children and developing mental illness as an adolescent or an adult? Dr. Morgan, would you like to start, or you have to unmute Dr. Morgan?
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, this is a classic thing, yes, that the attachment theory is that there aren't too many of us around that are secure attachment. It's lovely to have it, but a lot of people have got insecure attachment, and there are qualities in that developmental stage of a child that they might lay down unfortunate kind of connections and circuits in their brain that make them very sensitive to being alone or being judged or developing confidence. So I don't think the jury's out. I think the jury definitely says that insecure child experiences play out, particularly in adolescence, but throughout the rest of their life. Well, I'm saying that, and I'm waiting for Bruce's response.
Yeah.
Oh, well, actually, of course, Chris, it's not, I think, just theory now. There's lots of evidence that if we've grown up or very early in life, experienced life that's unpredictable, frightening, not safe, with lots of experiences that we just can't understand because, of course, we might not even have words yet for we're little, that can do things to our brain, which makes us much more reactive to stress. Now, that may be fine. We might get through childhood because life might not be very stressful, but in our adolescence, we might experience some very stressful experiences, or when we're an adult, we might be involved in a motor car crash, or we might be involved in some big conflict or in a bushfire or something like that. And our brains can then overreact and we can develop really big problems with our mental health around anxiety and so forth. In fact, the Mental Health Foundation Australia has been privileged to be involved in handling a wonderful and big donation from a private philanthropic trust to work together with a Professor Louise Newman, who's at the Albert Road Clinic, on a program for mothers with new babies. And those mothers, for example, have difficulties. For example, they might suffer from depression, or they might have problems with alcohol or drugs, or they might be in very impoverished circumstances, or they might be refugee women who've gone through all sorts of trauma. And this program is called the BEAR program, Building Early Attachment and Resilience. And it again is a parent education and skills program, but it's a program for parents of new babies or mothers who are pregnant and under stressful situations. And what that teaches them is how to tune into their baby, to listen to the baby's messages from their own behaviour, and to give the women a capacity to learn to love that child and provide a more predictable environment for them. Now, of course, life can still continue to give curveballs at the age of 20 or 25 or 50, and we'll react to that. But there's no doubt that if you get off to a good start in life, it'll be easier to trust life in the future. But it's not the end of it. If you had a difficult infancy, it doesn't mean you're on the rocks. In fact, there's every opportunity subsequently to grow and develop, particularly, for example, in having a good school education and a good experience at school.
Professor Brereton, do you have any comments on this question?
Just a very short one, and that is to say that I guess this is all about the importance of resilience, isn't it? You might have a rocky start in life, but if there's somebody there to help us with resilience from those early days on, we're going to do better. Some people have more resilience than others. Some have to learn it, but we know that it can be taught. And through these sort of parent support programs and the BEAR program, starting with infants, we know that change can happen.
Thank you. This has just recently come. When might family-based therapy be more beneficial than individual therapy for a parent?
That's a tricky question. I don't think there's a simple answer to that. I think what we've shown, what the research of Professor Sanders and many others have shown, is that there's no doubt that working with families, working with parents to build their parenting skills, to give them confidence, to provide predictable and secure experiences for their child has a positive impact on their own mental health. But that's not to say that another approach is around providing a good experience for an individual through psychological treatment, through sometimes the use of medication. In other words, mental illness can be taught. So excuse me, I'll hand over to Chris while we quieten a phone call that's coming through.
Thank you. Yes, Dr. Morgan.
It's going to, it's a terrific question. It's a broad question because the person may have family problems, but they may have some other comorbidity where specialist input is required, or, you know, just like a person could have an anxiety state, or they could have OCD, or they could have, you know, like bipolar disorder, where a specialist input is required. But we should take a holistic picture, because the parenting part of the person's presentation might be being affected by their own kind of personal adjustment. So it may not even be the same therapist. Like, obviously there are specialists in parenting, is where we've seen throughout this presentation the programs that are kind of groundbreaking and, you know, world regarded, the P program. And I didn't realize they had those online programs, which I think is a terrific resource. So the thing would be, the answer would be on a case-by-case basis. So if you've got a resource where you can join a parent group, I'd certainly recommend that to anybody, because it's a terrific experience for parents to be with other parents, as Avril mentioned earlier. And but it's also going to enrich their individual therapy as well, if they see themselves gaining, as the scores were shown on the triple parenting, that there was a substantial drop in the depression, anxiety, and stress experienced within the family. So I think in practice, there are many more individual therapists out there than there are the group programs, but I think they're both fantastic resources.
It reminds me of a sort of a joke. How many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb? Well, the old answer to that was one, because the light bulb has to want to change. But in fact, the better answer is none, because a psychiatrist actually has to work as part of a team. And so this is a community effect. People recover from mental health difficulties for all sorts of reasons. They recover because they're getting good and wise and evidence-based individual treatment, because they might be part of a support group, because they're in a family network. In other words, it's not an either or.
I think that one of the things that we found out over the space of about 15 years of developing parenting programs was that some people like to be in groups and others don't. Some people are attracted to the idea of joining the group program for whatever it is, and others don't. But an important part of our program was that we would have group sessions one week, and then the next week, everybody got an individual session. So it just gave this lovely rounding off to it. So something might be discussed in group, but it was in an individual session where people would add things that were particularly personal or important to them. So I think that the best programs are including both, because the collegiality, the friendships that develop, particularly if you've got a program like ours, which runs over several months, you see these lovely connections start to happen. In fact, some of our parent groups have got together. They, 10 years later, they go on group holidays together because they formed this lovely bond. So that happens in some instances, but I'm sure that a strength of our programs is offering the best of both worlds, and that is a group program and an individual program, which gives these other opportunities.
And there's another side to this question too, and that is there's a cultural context.
Yes.
Because we're one nation, but we're multicultural, as the foundation very much emphasises. And particularly for our Indigenous brothers and sisters, they're very much advocating and must be listened to in terms of they want culturally safe programs. They want to have a say, they want to have sovereignty in how their mental health services are delivered, because they have a different view of things. And that's so for every culture. There are some of the parent programs we've been talking about today are offered in different languages. And they've been modified by the expert in that language. In other words, the person with the lived experience of being Vietnamese or being Dutch or being whatever has made it culturally sensitive. And there are some cultures that don't like joining in groups. Their mental health business is very much private. In fact, there might even be an element of shame associated with it, which is a big hurdle. So all of these are complexities that we have to try and be aware of and respond to. And again, the foundation, as you know, tries to work across a broad range of cultures, but we take advice from our multicultural ambassadors that advise us on how to do things their way.
Yes. Thank you. Moving on, this is also another interesting question. Which is more difficult, parenting a child with mental illness or being a parent with a mental illness?
Well, they're different. I don't think it's a question of which is more difficult. For parents, having a child with a mental health problem or a mental illness is difficult. But for a child, having a parent with a mental illness is a very big challenge and perplexity. For example, I think it was in the Royal Commission into Mental Health Services in Victoria, there's a section in there about doing better with the families of the very seriously mentally ill. Quite often, if somebody with a serious mental illness is admitted to hospital, in the past at least, no one asked, what about the children? Or what about the spouse or the partner? But nowadays, it has to be an essential component of the management and treatment plan. In working with families, sometimes we find that it emerges that one of the parents has, for example, quite an acute and serious mental illness themselves. And what that requires then is collaboration with colleagues and with that person in order to get them help for themselves.
Yeah, look, I think this.
Dr. Mohan, you have to unmute.
Unmute. This is a very important area. I think there's an area in terms of, say, one of my areas of interest is OCD, and one of the ways in which that can be made aggravated is through family accommodation. So in other words, the family shapes their family home around accommodating for the patient's symptoms, and the second area, of course, is the area of treatment refusal. So those, if the child refuses treatment, okay, well, obviously we've got to help the parents to manage that, and so the parent. So let's take the parent with mental illness. Well, it's not. I suppose in a way, it's not an either or. The parent with mental illness is going to require what we were talking about in the last question. They're going to require both individual input and that inclusive parental kind of support, where they're talking to other people with similar problems. But talking about the child with the mental illness, want to be careful of denial that they've got a problem, of reassurance, like of trying to play it down, but then there's that last one actually making it worse. Now, so what we don't do all that well in mental health is we don't wonder what happens to the 30% that don't respond to either medication or therapy. But generally speaking, people will respond at roughly that level with either medication or a combination with various forms of therapy. But it's the non-responders, I think, are an area where we need to put more resources into it, because that child that is I don't know, nothing, whatever, you know, they kind of just are blocking you off the whole time.
Yeah, that's a very important point, Chris. We know that carers of children or adolescents or adults, for that matter, who have ongoing and serious mental health difficulties face enormous burden. They're often very isolated. They're expected to manage everything. Their whole lives are put on hold sometimes. They have financial difficulties because they've got such a big burden of care. Many times they can't work anymore. And the other complication is parents tend to blame themselves. It must be something I've done, or maybe it's the problem with my family. And so then there's tension in a marriage. And it's unfortunately not uncommon that conflict between the parents who have a child or an adolescent or an adult with a serious mental health problem start to conflict with each other. And they are a forgotten group at times. Again, the Royal Commission into the Mental Health of Victorians did talk about how much better services need to be provided for carers. Because as Chris points out, unfortunately, mental illness sometimes doesn't go away. We don't have an effective vaccine against some mental health problems. We need more research into looking at why do people become mentally ill? What can we do to actually provide evidence-based treatments? So it's a very good question, that, and one that we could talk about much longer, I'm sure.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Tong. This next question is directed to Professor Brereton. Are children born with mental illness? Can you identify mental illness in a newborn child?
Well, it depends what you're talking about and what you mean by mental illness. So, and I think that Professor Tong and Dr. Rogan might have some other comments to make about that. But if this question was relating to autism, because I've been talking about autism, then we know that yes, children are born with autism, but those symptoms may not be apparent at birth. And for parents where the child with autism is their first child, they may not be noticing differences in their very little baby. Whereas if it's perhaps a second or third child of some parents, they'll be picking up differences very early on. But generally, we can definitely see differences in infants and toddlers who have autism from about 18 months of age. And there are screening tests to help us assess those very young children. So it depends what you're talking about or what this person was meaning by mental illness. But Bruce, would you like to make a comment about that?
By and large, we really can't know when a child's born that they're going to have a mental illness. Yeah. It takes life and development and all sorts of changes. Even, for example, there are some genetic conditions in which we know that child has a high likelihood of developing certain sorts of problems. But even then, that's not a certainty. No. Because experience, whether they're in stressful situations or in a loving environment, whether they've had good education or not, can bend a trajectory of development.
I think it takes us back to our sausage machine, as we call it, at the very beginning, when you have in the middle the core of mental well-being and good health and all of the things that impact on that at different stages and times.
So even children that are born with a degree of intellectual disability, or mental retardation, as it used to be called, you can't predict their outcome exactly because the environment plays a big part as well.
Dr. Morgan, your thoughts on this? You have to unmute. You have to unmute, Dr. Morgan.
I would just add the importance of early intervention and my general point that I think the world would be a different place if we were more inclusive, so that, you know, their outcome of their life is not determined by the way, you know, the social circumstances in which they're born. You know, we want, you know, our values should put a priority on proper health and education for everybody. We could easily do that. We can feed the world, we can educate the world, but we spend a lot of money on bombs and things and rockets and so forth.
Thank you. So there's one more question that's just come through. How can parents deal with parental guilt should their child develop a mental illness?
How can parents deal with guilt?
Well, I think in one way it's something to be discussed. And if their child does develop a mental illness, hopefully they'll be seeing people about that. They might be seeing a psychologist or a GP or a psychiatrist or a social worker. And they can talk about it and they'll learn about that. The other thing that can help are parent support groups. For example, let's take the area of autism. There, in most regions in Australia, there are parent support groups or networks of parents that have a child with that condition. And sharing your ideas with other parents can help learn about the fact that not to blame yourself.
That's right.
And so it's a question, it's a very human and ordinary reaction. When we've got a problem, we tend to say, is it our fault? But humans,
what did I do?
Yeah, what
Yes.
did I do? But we can also find solutions and come to realise that, in fact, even if we have made a contribution to it, then there are things we can do to turn that around ourselves too. So it's discussion, seeking information, learning about things, and sharing it, listening to others.
Dr. Mohan, you have to unmute.
I thought I'd get this right by the end of the program. But look, one piece of research, I don't think it's groundbreaking research, would be that those people who actually seek help are more likely to make progress than people who don't seek help. So first of all, we'd like to encourage people to access help because our mind's an amazing thing. And people think about on the physical level, our body can heal. Terrible accidents occur and the body heals. Now, my idea is that there's a healing mind as well. So if a person talks about their issues and accepts, like most people that walk through the door of a therapist's room, and actually most people in the world think there's something wrong with them. Everybody's critical of how they look and what they achieve. And we've got this kind of, I don't know, whether it's some sort of comparing ourselves with others or whatever it might be. But what we do know is that the new information can come into our memory and alter the way our brain functions. So if we get new information and we try to put these changes into practice, the opportunity there for change is universal. So I don't mean that everybody should be in therapy when, after all, we're not Americans, but what we could do is encourage people to engage in life and to be communicate with friends, to take on projects, to build up. The best way to improve your self-esteem is to set a goal and reach it, no matter how small that goal may be. So life is an adventure that way. So I would just forgotten what the actual question was, but yeah, if you're born with an issue, are you stuck with that issue? Definitely not. We are aware of our past, our future, and our present, and we can time travel in that sense. So we've got to be optimistic about life. And you see so many remarkable stories about people who overcome the most dreadful traumas and lead a fruitful and successful life. They've got to keep persisting. That's the word.
This is one very interesting question. It's come through as a text message. My child does everything at home. He's not shy, but when I take him out in public, does not talk, does not want to mingle with other children. He's totally the opposite. I'm totally confused. What should I do? About shyness.
Now, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, shyness is kind of personality characteristic, but when the child goes outside, he's not as secure. He's not as, so we've all got a threat detection system in our brain. Now, when he goes outside, he is uncertain about how to deal with things. So what we've got to try to do is to help him to go outside with that same sort of level of confidence that he has at home. The child is not pointed out that they can do anything at home, but when they go out, they become anxious. And so what we want to try to do is show them that repeatedly going out, not avoiding going out, repeatedly going out will bring about a change. But you've got to make it a graded, repeated process where everybody's understanding and supportive. So this is Pavlovian conditioning in a way, that you can learn that you can be safe in a particular environment. And that's what psychologists and psychiatrists and mental health workers are doing all the time. They're trying to help people to see that what they were afraid of, they didn't need to be afraid of. And the uncertainty that they feel, they can learn to live with.
Thank you.
I don't know whether that's an answer, but that's my answer.
Thank you, Dr. Mohan. Any comments, Professor Abril and Brewstone?
Look, I'm mindful of the time now, and but it's a good question, and maybe that's a segue into sort of the concluding remarks, and that is that if anybody listening to this program webinar has questions or concerns about their own children or their own family or themselves, ask for help. And it's there. They can ring MHFA hotline or Lifeline or Kids Helpline, or go to their GP, or talk perhaps to your child's teacher at school if you're worried. There will be somebody in your community who you might trust that you're going to go and ask for help from, and that's the first step. And in fact, sometimes that's all that's needed, but it's essential that it's taken.
Thank you. So thanks to all of you for such an insightful discussion today. This is an excellent presentation on evidence-based parenting programs and supporting children with special needs as well. So I'd like to extend my sincere thanks on behalf of the Foundation to all of you. My special mention to Australian Unity, Chemist Own, and Food Solutions for enabling MHFA to deliver National Mental Health Month. If you would like to engage in many more events during National Mental Health Month, feel free to visit our website, www.mhfa.org.au for more information. Thank you, everyone, and have a lovely day.